And hello, everyone. I am the new General Counsel for the Legal Services Corporation. And it's my pleasure this afternoon to moderate a panel with the title, The Critical Role of Varied Messengers to Support Legal Aid. And in order to discuss this topic, we have a distinguished group of messengers from diverse backgrounds in different parts of the legal community. And so what I'd like to do is briefly introduce each of our panelists. Well, but before I do that, what I'd like to do is thank each of them for their roles in signing on to letters representing their various aspects of the legal community. We had a letter from law school deans, a letter from corporate general counsels, and a letter from law firm leaders. All of these letters, all three of these letters, went to members of the House of Representatives and also members of the US Senate advocating for support for legal aid. And we just want to thank you for your support in that area. And now to introduce our distinguished panelists. First of all, we have with us Kerry Abrams, the Dean and Professor of Law for Duke University School of Law. Dean Abrams became the Dean at Duke in 2018. Prior to appointment at Duke Law, she served on the law faculty of the University of Virginia, and more recently as UVA's Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs. She formerly practiced as a commercial litigator at Patterson, Belknap, Webb, and Tyler. Welcome, Dean Abrams. Next, we have a former colleague of mine, and that's Ivan Fong, the Executive Vice President and Chief of Legal and Policy Officer of the 3M Company. In 2009, he was appointed by President Obama and confirmed by the Senate to serve as the General Counsel for the United States Department of Homeland Security. At that time, I was serving as General Counsel for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Ivan serves on the Board of Directors of Equal Justice Works and is a member of the Legal Services Corporation's Leaders Council. Welcome, Ivan. Next, we have Harriet Myers. Harriet is a partner and former managing partner of the Locklord Law Firm. She served in the administration of President George W. Bush, first as White House Staff Secretary and later as White House Counsel. She currently serves as a commissioner of the Texas Access to Justice Commission, and she serves as co-chair of the Legal Services Corporation's Leaders Council. Finally, as we should say, last but certainly not least, we have Dean William Traynor, who is the Executive Vice President and Dean of Georgetown University Law Center. He's the Chair and Paul Regis Dean Leadership Chair. Dean Traynor joined Georgetown as Dean and Executive Vice President of Georgetown University Law Center in 2010. He was previously the Dean and Paul Fuller Professor of Law at Fordham Law School, and he was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences for Law as a 2020 class member, and has been named one of the most influential people in legal education by the National Jurist magazine multiple times. He's also a member of the Legal Services Corporation's Leaders Council. Welcome, Dean Traynor.
Delighted to be here.
To get us started, what I'd like to do is have each of you respond to an overall question, and that is, just would you tell us why it's important to support LSC and why access justice issues matter to you personally? If we could start with Dean Abrams.
Thank you so much. And before I begin, I just want to thank everyone
who's participated today, and thank you to LSC for putting on this amazing set of panels. As a law school dean, I believe it's my personal mission to educate the next generation of lawyers and teach them to work toward justice for all. And a big theme today has been that there is a justice gap that exists in which the needs that Americans have for civil legal services just can't be met through the resources that we currently have. So in my role as dean, I have to face the reality that my students are entering a world of legal practice that is grossly unfair to millions of Americans who are living near or below the poverty line, and that we have to work together to change that. And I feel a personal and professional obligation to support legal aid and ensure that the lawyers who are entering the profession really understand the need for legal services. I thought I'd share a short personal story, and that's that before I became a dean, I taught family law for many years. And I was shocked to discover when I was teaching family law, how many people came to me for advice. I think I joked at one point that every person in the building had come and shared their story with me at one time or another, whether I knew them or not. They found the family law professor and told me their story. There were custody disputes, there were divorces, there were paternity cases that were being contested. But the big theme among everyone was that something catastrophic and unexpected had happened to them, and they didn't know what to do. And of course, I referred everyone to lawyers. But most of the people who were coming to me because they couldn't afford a lawyer. They were trying to find some other avenue to get the legal services that they needed. And I left that experience really feeling like, if you were starting a business, you would factor in the cost of doing business, factor legal services into that cost. You might think, oh, I might have a contract dispute. I might have to have legal advice at some point. But in our personal lives, we aren't factoring in the cost of doing business or the cost of being human and allocating money for legal services. That's not how human beings work, and that's not how they should work. We should be able to fall in love. We should be able to have children. We should be able to live our lives, have housing, do the things we need to do without having to factor in the fact that we might get into a conflict with someone and need to hire a lawyer. And so, it's easy to imagine if you're a student studying family law or any other subject that all the litigants in the cases you're reading about had access to legal counsel. But the reality is that they didn't, and that some of those cases might have turned out very differently if they had. So as a dean, I now want each of my students to graduate from law school understanding just how important access to justice is, how rare it is, and be ready to pitch in to make legal representation more available to more people who need our help.
Thank you very much. Ivan, how about you? Why does it matter to you?
Sure. Thank you, Will. And it's great to be on a screen with you. Great to see you again. And thank you also to the Legal Services Corporation for hosting this important conversation. So as a corporate general counsel, I think of three reasons why it's important to support access to justice. The first is something we've talked about at length, which is that the need is great. The justice gap that we talk about is in truth a chasm. As you've heard throughout today's program, as we sit here today, 4 out of 5 low-income Americans cannot find a lawyer when they need one. And the unmet legal needs in our communities is growing. Literally millions of our neighbors and their families are struggling, whether it's poverty, housing and homelessness, mental illness, the list goes on. These are people who desperately need access to civil courts to enforce their basic rights. And I believe all of us in both the corporate and the legal communities have an obligation and an opportunity to help. The second reason stems from the acknowledgement of this need, which is that as a good corporate citizen, companies like 3M want to ensure that they are operating in communities where the employees that we have and their communities are healthy. And that means that for us as our legal department, we have a robust pro bono program, but also that we ought to support financially basic infrastructure and services such as legal aid. And the third reason is really a more, to me, interesting reason. It's a bit of the business case. And it starts from the view that for businesses to thrive and grow, it needs to have a stable social environment and structure. When we decide to invest or start to sell in a country, one of the things that we look at is there a reliable and independent judiciary? Can we enforce our contracts and property rights? Is there a good rule of law? And part of a country's commitment to the rule of law, it seems to me, is that there has to be access to justice for its residents. And increasing access to justice aligns with having a strong, stable social and legal environment for companies to operate, to thrive, and to grow, and thereby contribute needed goods and services in that community. So I can go on at length, but those are three reasons why I think corporations do care about supporting legal aid.
Thank you very much. Harriet, how about you? Why do these issues matter for you?
Well, I'll just have to say thank you also to LSC and all of the participants today. This has been wonderful to hear and encouraging to hear. But I could probably answer that question in a very short phrase by just saying, why is access to justice important to me? Well, I would incorporate by reference everything that's been said and covered so far in this forum. It's been amazing in its breadth and in the commentary and in the obvious passion that people have for these issues, beginning with John Levy and and Ron Flagg and all of the LSC folks that are working around the clock for us. And the reason that I feel it's so important to support LSC is that it really is the backbone of the delivery system of legal services to the poor in our nation. So there is no other organization that has the arms and legs and brains, I should add, that LSC has working to make sure that we are making progress. And to hear the astounding results in terms of increased funding is wonderful. And one of the reasons for that is the genius of and John Levy, but others too, that understand that lawyers can't do it all by themselves. So engaging other professions and engaging, as we were referencing earlier, all of society in these issues, educating them and getting them as passionate about these issues as we are, really is where and how we can solve the problem. So engaging with the community at large is something that's sort of a next step. Certainly we've made progress, but we have a lot more progress to make. But it's that backbone that allows lawyers at my firm, for example, to engage in pro bono. For example, in a landlord-tenant clinic, they can't go over there and just start from scratch and become experts in that field. They have to have the guidance of what the issues are and what the even procedural issues are. So that's all enabled by LSC. And LSC can't do it, of course, without funding. So I just really am grateful to all of the contributions that the LSC organization and all of its supporters make to enable our lawyers and lawyers throughout the nation and other firms to do pro bono work. And in return, of course, they ask for contributions, and we all can talk to our organizations of all types, whether it's a business organization or a church or whatever. If we can instill the need to increase this access to justice, we need to be doing it everywhere that we can do it and raising money everywhere. So I think the education that this work does for our firms is important, because we can accomplish something, but we also see our lawyers trained through it. We see our lawyers reminded of why they have a law license. We see our lawyers feeling accomplished, like they've done something good and their profession is meaningful. So it's certainly a two-way street where the firms are able to contribute, but the benefits for the law firm and its lawyers is certainly there also. And I'll just, I could go on, but I'll mention one other thing about the study that's going on in forums like this are accomplishing, and that is the uncovering of unknown needs. People don't know they have legal needs. And it's exemplified in the Veterans Task Force that LSC has been doing in cooperation with other organizations and the American Academy and others, where we learn that veterans are, in fact, sometimes discharged. They don't know that their records can be cleared. And yet a lawyer can look at something and say, well, this person doesn't need to live the rest of their lives with this record that they currently have, or they don't know what benefits really should be being received. So it's this uncovering, even we know about a lot of needs that aren't being met, but there are a lot of needs out there that if we dig in, we find that there are legal solutions that in fact have something we'll talk about later, which is not only legal services that are needed by the poor, but also steps that the law takes that increases the economic wherewithal of the people who are being helped. So I just, I'll end on the note that we owe LSC a lot.
Thank you very, very much. Dean Traynor, I don't know if it can be separated, but why does access to justice matter to you, both personally and in your role as an educator?
Well, yeah, thanks very much, Will. And again, it's a privilege to be part of this conversation and to be, talking to people who are making such a profound difference in society. So, thank you. I was actually, I was thinking about this question, listening to our other panels, and it reminded me the very first case I worked on when I was a young lawyer. I was doing pro bono work with a senior legal aid lawyer in Manhattan in a housing case. And, and I spent an afternoon in housing court. And what I saw was when people were represented by lawyers, when tenants were represented by lawyers, they won, but they rarely were represented by lawyers. And so they were getting evicted, even though you just knew that as a matter of law, they had a right to stay in their apartment and not be kicked out. And, that had such a profound influence on me. And we heard now, we just heard the last session, Attorney General Racine talked about, evicted, and the bottom line is when people are represented by lawyers in housing court, they almost always win. And when they aren't, they never win. And that's why, I have to say that memory of that afternoon in housing court has really shaped my sense of the power of what legal aid does. And it's shocking and appalling. Ivan was talking about 4 out of 5 people, low income people don't get the legal representation they need because they don't have the money. And then there's also people who just earn a little bit more than that. who don't get legal representation because they can't afford it. They don't qualify for free legal aid, but they're being evicted. They're the victims of domestic violence. So I mean, the incredibly shocking situation that I saw in 1986 is even worse now. And legal services play such a fundamental role in making sure that people have a shot of getting the legal representation that they deserve. And I also feel that as an educator, Carrie talked about, what Duke is doing. The Georgetown motto is laws, but the means justice is the end. So, we're going to have people who are going to follow all different paths. But what we really want to do is to convey to them that they, as lawyers, have a fundamental duty to make the world a better place and to fight for justice. So again, some of them will become legal aid attorneys. Some of them will become private practitioners. Some of them will go into business. Some of them will go into government. But that is their fundamental duty. And again, supporting legal services is an obligation that we all have.
Thank you very much. Harriet, I'd like to return to you for a moment. You're in a large law firm. What do firms such as yours get out of partnering with legal aid?
Well, I guess I'd probably reference some of what I said earlier and say what we experience is happier lawyers, more satisfied lawyers, more responsible lawyers, better trained lawyers, people who become leaders and maintain their interest in the practice of law to a greater extent. So it's almost what benefits are we able to get, but it's really also why it's beneficial to participate in legal services activities. And so I will say we have an example of a lawyer in our firm who devised what was important to her as providing affordable housing. And she started practicing affordable housing, and everybody thought that was quite admirable, but it's also turned out to be an incredible career for her. And that's all she does is affordable housing. And I don't know how many firms have partners that specialize in that particular area, but it's been a great area for that partner and a great area for our law firm. We're very proud of it.
Great, thank you very much. Dean Abrams, when I was in law school in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s, there wasn't very much of an emphasis on clinical education. I got a chance to work in the Legal Aid Bureau and got some great experience. My understanding is that there's been a shift somewhat in legal education over the years. Could you talk about that and how partnering with legal aid helps your students?
Yes, absolutely. You're so right, Will. There's been a huge, I think, blossoming of clinical legal education. I think across law schools, especially in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, Duke had one of the first clinics. We had our first clinic in 1931, but we really didn't start having a full-fledged clinical program until much more recently. And for anyone out there who isn't aware of what law school clinics are, the way I like to describe it is you wouldn't go to medical school without actually meeting live patients. And law school clinics function like that. Our students have live clients who they're working with, and they're actually learning how to practice law and not just reading about it. And so it's been a real shift in how we think about what it means to be prepared to be a lawyer. Over 3/4 of our students at Duke now graduate having taken a clinic. And I think that makes a huge difference in what they're prepared to do when they graduate. I don't think we could have our clinics or function as a clinical program without legal aid. A lot of our clinical faculty come from legal aid. That's where they've gotten their training as lawyers, and now they're teaching students how to be effective legal aid lawyers. But we also partner with local organizations. So, one example to continue on our theme of evictions this afternoon, one example of a partnership that we've been engaged in that was really, really successful was a partnership between the Duke Law Civil Justice Clinic and Legal Aid of North Carolina, which together in 2017 created an eviction diversion program. And the idea here was to settle cases where tenants were being evicted. And in many cases, as others have pointed out today, just having representation meant that person got to stay in their home. But the interesting thing was, even in the cases where our students were not able to settle the case in a way that kept someone in their home, having an out-of-court settlement and not having an eviction on that person's record made an enormous difference for them. Now, there are all sorts of things that happen once you've been evicted, and many of our clients would have had a blot on their credit record. They might not have been able to get a new lease. They might not have even been eligible for Habitat for Humanity. And so having this program was helpful to clients, regardless of whether they actually stayed in the home that they had been in at the beginning of their representation. And that was a true partnership between the law school and North Carolina Legal Aid. But I do think it's important to recognize that law school clinics and law school pro bono work, although they're wonderful programs and really great ways of helping to educate a new generation of lawyers, are not a substitute for legal aid. We are an educational institution, so our priority is always going to be helping students learn how to be good lawyers. But that does not necessarily mean that we can take every case that comes through our doors. If anything, it means that we can't. We have to pick and choose the cases in ways that are going to give our students the best educational opportunity they can have, and also ones that they actually can handle themselves, obviously with supervision from the faculty that they are working with. So a student-focused clinic just doesn't have the capacity to meet the demand that it would take to close the access to justice gap. And even if every law school in the country had every student taking a clinic, we would not be anywhere near where we need to be in terms of support for legal aid. So I think of the law schools as a piece of the puzzle and as part of our future, but not as a substitute in any way.
Thank you so much. Ivan, you, in your answer to the last question, you talked about the business decision as to being cognizant of the rule of law in a country that 3M or other corporations may go into, and that being a part of your calculus as to whether or not you go there. But this is the United States. Is that relevant in our context?
Absolutely, it's relevant. I think our system of justice, unfortunately, fails low-income members of our community, and it not only causes immediate and short-term economic harm. I think it erodes faith in our system of justice, in the fairness that people need to believe that they're going to get a fair shake in our courts. And if they're not represented, or if they feel that the judicial system is biased against them, that is a broader community harm that I think does adversely affect all members of our community. I think everyone benefits when we're able to keep our most vulnerable residents safe, housed, and able to exercise the benefits or obtain the benefits to which they're entitled. And I think that's what legal aid does. In preparing for this meeting, I saw a very interesting report by the Minnesota Legal Services Coalition and the Minnesota State Bar Association that found that for every dollar invested in civil legal aid programs in Minnesota, the return on investment was over $3, close to $4 for every dollar that you invest. So the broader ripple economic benefits in terms of avoidance of future government services, lowered unemployment, protecting families from homelessness that creates future other costs to the community, preventing veterans from falling into poverty by getting them access to their benefits, helping victims of natural disasters, helping elderly individuals. All of this contributes to the overall health of a community. And so, in my mind, there are many, many reasons why, even in the United States, there needs to be continued investment and support for civil legal aid. And I'll close with, you had asked earlier, why am I so committed? I'm personally committed because of my, background as an immigrant family, wanting to give back to our communities, and my experience doing pro bono work. I agree with Dean Abrams that it's not the cure-all for sure, but the experiences have been incredibly valuable to me in terms of learning how to be a good lawyer, opening my eyes to the world around me, exposing me to different people and different walks of life. So in addition to just the need and the professional responsibility, I tell our lawyers, do pro bono for no other reason than it's fun and it gives you meaning and purpose. I think as I talk to younger lawyers, they're really searching for meaning and purpose. And to me, doing pro bono work is the best avenue, I think, for answering the question, right? Why did you become a lawyer? You became a lawyer for some reason, and most likely one of those reasons was to serve, was to help other people. And you can do that in many ways. You can do it in a law firm, you can do it in the government, you can do it in a corporation. But if you do some pro bono work, because it'll really give you meaning and purpose.
Thank you very much. Dean Traynor, I've read that you've placed a experiential education and clinicals and such as you place priority there. I'm just wondering, I've been away from law school for quite a while. Here in the 2020s, are you finding that students are coming into law school with an appreciation at all for these issues in terms of the justice gap and rule of law issues in our nation? So I'm just curious.
Yes. No, I mean, I think that's something that, I'm seeing, very profoundly. Law school applications are way up. This year we had 14,000 applicants at Georgetown. And so it's a dramatic increase from the past few years. And I think it's because, for a variety of reasons, but students really now, they want to make a difference. And they have a sense that what lawyers do is really critical. So it's really, it's a driver, and I think it's going to make a profound difference. It's one of the things that I found as an educator incredibly energizing. And and we're also, as you were saying, and as Carrie was saying, we are all very much focused now on experiential education in a way that 20 years ago we weren't. So Georgetown has 20 clinics, and we have 40 practica, which are seminars where they do a policy project or a seminar where they're working under a more senior attorney. So it's a lot of opportunities. I do want to emphasize, what Carrie said. They do incredibly important work, but it's primarily about preparing them to make a difference rather than, it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the legal services, that we really need. But again, it's all about preparing people to make a difference and to make this a more just society. And now, what we're seeing in a way that, I think we haven't seen in a long time. That's what's bringing people to law school. And again, they're going to follow all different paths, but, this drive to make a difference is really, it's really animating them. And that's terrific.
Thank you. Harriet, I know being there in a law firm setting, you have, you get the products of what the deans are producing, the deans and the other faculties are producing. I'm just curious, in this age that we're confronting, you're getting young lawyers who are coming to you, sometimes directly out of law school, sometimes from clerkships and in other settings. Are they coming in with an appreciation for these issues? Do these issues matter to them? Are you having to steer them in that direction?
Well, I think there's a mixture of, like in any group, some law students come in and their interests are different, but certainly I believe that schools are, this day and time, giving students a taste of what they can do to help people, and that being active in access to justice issues or active in various causes is part of being a lawyer as much as it is representing the clients that you are representing in a paid fashion. So I do think there's value being added to firms, to corporations for that matter, where the younger lawyers are very interested in having an impact and the extra meaning that being generous with your time and talents brings. So I do think schools are very conscious about that. And then you have the new lawyers coming on, as well as those that have been here a while, pushing for certain things to happen and the firm to do certain things that is great.
Thank you. We're a bit beyond the time that we originally planned to end. So what I'd like to do is just give each of you an opportunity to respond to this, and that is, what should other leaders know about the legal needs of the underserved and how they can help to increase access to justice? And if we'll go around the horn, if I could start with you, Dean Abrams.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And again, for this wonderful panel. I really think what Ivan said earlier about the rule of law is so important for everyone to understand. When you need a lawyer suddenly, it's usually because something unpleasant or traumatic is happening in your life. And having a lawyer makes all the difference. You can't make that trauma go away, but it can make the difference between surmounting an obstacle or having a life-changing experience in the worst possible way. And if you have a whole group of people in our society who do not have access to that help, the entire system is undermined, and people's faith in it and their sense of membership and citizenship is undermined. And so if we really here in the United States want to say that we're a country that operates under the rule of law, we need to be a country that has access to justice for our citizens. Now, I've been amazed over the last year thinking about how we were able to come up as a society with vaccines for a deadly disease in only about a year. You know, we have autonomous vehicles now. We have systems where I can tell a robot what song I want to listen to, and I can hear it right now. And yet we still haven't fully cracked the nut of how do we provide access to people for legal services that they need. We should be able to figure that out. You know, LSC is obviously the leader in helping us to get there, but we need everyone to pull together in order to make this happen, because it's a problem that all of us together as a society need to take responsibility for, lawyers and everyone else.
Thank you so much. Ivan, how about you? What should other leaders need to, what do they need to know about these issues?
Yeah, I love this question because it goes beyond knowing the facts. I think that's the first step, is just read the LSC reports about the state of civil legal aid in the United States. But the message I would want them to hear is that they are not alone, that they should leverage their role or position and amplify their voices. I think only by delivering this message collectively can we really move the needle. And I think for corporate general counsel, for example, advocating before Congress for full federal funding is one way. I think using the power of the purse to support and retain law firms that show a deep commitment to pro bono work and that have good policies that promote pro bono work, advocating for state permission, loosening restrictions on the ability of in-house lawyers to do pro bono, and being an advocate in terms of corporate philanthropy, that we can all contribute toward this important cause of equal justice under law, which is really the promise of our Constitution, of our Declaration of Independence, the reason why we exist as a country, to establish justice, to form a more perfect union. And these are all just very fundamental tenets of our democracy that we need to make real, and every leader can help.
Thank you so much. Dean Traynor, how about you?
I mean, I think the basic point is that the stakes could not be higher. In a society that is a democracy based on the rule of law, when a large part of our population is not protected by the law because they don't have lawyers, that's a challenge to who we are as a society, and it's a challenge to who we are as a democracy. So, I think that, there are different ways in which we as leaders can focus on addressing this access to justice crisis. There are just a lot of different initiatives. If we had more time, we could talk about things that we're doing at law schools or things that firms are doing or corporations are doing. But I would say two things. One is, I think we all have to dedicate ourselves to thinking through ways we can help address this issue, either through politics or through our individual action. And then, just to go back to why we're all here, finding ways to support legal, LSC, because the work of legal services is transformative and necessary. And I think all of us have an obligation to support it and make sure that it has, among other things, the funding that it so critically needs.
Great. Thank you. Harriet, as co-chair of LSC's Leaders Council, I give you the last word.
Well, so many wonderful comments have been made by my co-panelists. Again, I'll just want to incorporate them all by reference and underscore them. But as our legal system goes, so goes the nation. And as we are competing on a world stage and people are looking at us, the fact that we rank pretty low on the index of access to justice that in the studies that are done around in other countries, and it is just unacceptable. So engaging every aspect of our society, from our schools to our corporations, to the law schools, to the political leadership, across the board, the access to justice issues in this country have to be effectively addressed. And we are thankful that there is such a thing as Legal Services Corporation, that it has emerged as such a leader with great leadership at the helm in the organization. So thank you Will, for all of your efforts, every member of the LSC team, and of course, its leadership for everything that you do day in and day out. And I've seen enough to know that there is great passion there. It's not a job, it is a passion. And what we need to do is to continue to involve not just one organization or the folks like are on the screen that participate with the organization, but every occupation, every type of endeavor that goes on in our nation. So we're not talking about these issues with ourselves, but with the nation at large.
Well, thank you very much, Harriet. I greatly appreciate it. And I want to thank each of our panelists today for your insights that you shared during the session, as well as for your commitment to these issues. Thank you.